Barron Trump's public breakdown shocked everyone, but it's what Traore did at that very moment that sent ripples across not just his country, but the world. You won't believe how two individuals can face crises so differently. Brace yourself for this eye-opening comparison. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. Barron Trump's life has always seemed like a spectacle of wealth and privilege. As the youngest son of Donald Trump, much of the public assumes he enjoys a life far removed from ordinary struggles. However, recent reports suggest that growing up under the shadow of one of the most polarizing figures in modern history comes with burdens that can't simply be brushed aside. Behind the carefully curated veil of opulence lies a narrative of mounting pressure, family expectations, and the weight of public scrutiny that Barron has had to carry from a young age. As the youngest member of a political dynasty, Barron's upbringing has been starkly different from that of most people his age. During Trump's presidency, much effort went into shielding him from the harshest glare of media attention. Compared to his older siblings, who were active participants in the Trump business empire and political ventures, Barron maintained a quieter presence. But while silence might afford protection at times, it also fuels curiosity and speculation. Over the years, he's been turned into an enigma by the public, observed at a distance, interpreted through brief moments caught on camera, and burdened with expectations that were never self-imposed. All of this has created a backdrop where even the slightest sign of struggle becomes an event. Recent media reports have hinted at what some are calling a loss of control by Barron Trump. The specifics remain murky, with scattered narratives taking hold across different outlets. Some claim that he's struggling with newfound independence. Others suggest a deeper tension stemming from his family's political legacy. However, the details of his behavior remain largely speculative, underscoring how the media thrives on unpredictability to frame stories about public figures. While some portray him as a young man buckling under pressure, others argue that these are typical growing pains magnified by the microscope he lives under. Caught between praise and criticism, both amplified by his family name, Barron's challenges seem to take on an outsized significance, often with little concrete information to provide meaningful context. This intense media focus raises questions about the psychological toll of bearing such a heavily scrutinized identity. Being linked to a family surrounded by constant controversy means that Barron isn't judged just for his individual traits, but for what he represents, the presumed heir to a divisive legacy. Public perception of his father casts a long shadow, shaping the way people view Barron's every move. Research on children of well-known public figures highlights how difficult it can be for them to develop a sense of individuality while carrying their family's notoriety. The constant tension between personal growth and public expectation creates fertile ground for frustration and isolation. Examples from history show us what this can look like. Winston Churchill's son, Randolph, is often cited as someone who struggled under the weight of his father's towering reputation. Despite his intelligence and ambition, Randolph faced relentless comparisons to his father's iconic leadership and suffered under the pressure to measure up. Similarly, the children of dynastic political families, like the Kennedys, have often found themselves trapped in narratives they didn't choose, while their personal challenges have been dissected by the public in invasive ways. For Barron, the situation is no different. Although born into privilege, that privilege comes with a price, one that seems more apparent as he faces his personal obstacles in plain view. What makes Barron's situation even more compelling is its contrast to another young figure charting a vastly different course on a far more challenging stage. Traore, thrust into the harsh reality of political leadership, represents a striking foil to Barron's experience. While one is grappling internally with the ripple effects of privilege and notoriety, the other is fighting externally to secure the future of an entire nation. The differences in their circumstances could not be more pronounced, yet both stories reveal the heavy burden that comes with the public gaze. For teenagers and young adults like Barron, the emotional impact of such intense scrutiny is hard to overstate. They're in that critical stage of life where identity is still being formed, yet every misstep is magnified. The weight of expectations combined with the constant pressure to navigate both private and public challenges can feel unbearable. For someone like Barron, who has largely grown up at arm's length from the public's curiosity, the sudden shift of attention onto him is bound to leave its mark, shaping how he views the world and himself. But while Barron's struggles play out in the corners of the media under a veil of speculation, Traore's actions are fully in the spotlight, commanding attention worldwide. But here's what's fascinating. While one seems to be unraveling quietly under personal pressures, the other has stepped forward loudly, with boldness and clarity, to define his nation's future. Let's look closer at how one young man steps into the role of leader as the world watches. In the middle of Burkina Faso's turbulent political landscape, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stands as a bold and unflinching figure. At just 34, he has risen to prominence through a military coup in 2022, stepping into a leadership role that many might shy away from. His ascent came at a time when the nation faced deep unrest, and his leadership has since captured widespread attention, both for its controversial style and its radical vision. To understand what drives Traoré's actions, one needs to look beyond the surface and focus on the changes he's trying to make in a country long fraught with external influences and internal struggles. Traoré inherited a nation grappling with political instability and economic hardship. Burkina Faso's challenges are well documented: decades of neo-colonial exploitation, uneven development, and persistent insecurity. Unlike leaders who may have approached these issues cautiously, Traoré has taken a defiant path. His leadership has been marked by an unwavering rejection of foreign control, particularly focusing on cutting ties with France, Burkina Faso's former colonizer. In a dramatic move, he ended French military cooperation, expelled troops, and invited Russian paramilitary forces for assistance. For many, these actions symbolize a reclaiming of sovereignty, but they've also drawn scrutiny from international observers wary of growing Russian influence in Africa. Traoré has made it clear that Burkina Faso's mineral wealth must benefit its people, not foreign multinationals. His administration created a state-owned mining company and mandated that foreign firms cede portions of their operations to the state. Beyond this, he introduced plans to establish the country's first national gold reserves and build a gold refinery. These actions are a clear break from the past and aim to rewrite the narrative of post-colonial resource exploitation. Traoré doesn't shy away from voicing his frustrations openly. Speaking at the Second Russia-Africa Economic and Humanitarian Forum, he condemned imperialist control, stating, "We African heads of state have to stop behaving like puppets who dance every time the imperialists pull the strings." For many young Africans, this level of candor is inspiring, even revolutionary, making Traoré a symbol of defiance against old systems. Still, Traoré's leadership is not without controversy. Critics label some of his decisions as heavy-handed. He has suspended political parties, cracked down on press freedoms, and pushed aside civil society organizations that oppose his vision. These moves have raised questions about the balance of power in his administration. However, his supporters argue that such strict measures are necessary to overcome the chaos that his government inherited. That perspective often aligns with the broader sentiment among citizens, many of whom express deep support for his policies in public demonstrations. One such rally in Ouagadougou saw thousands of Burkina-based citizens marching in solidarity with Traoré. Prime Minister Emmanuel Ouedraogo later described Traoré as a unifying figure who embodies sovereignty and African dignity. Traoré's popularity extends beyond his country. Across Africa, he is seen as part of a new wave of leaders resisting external domination, much like Burkina Faso's former leader Thomas Sankara, whose legacy continues to resonate. Traoré's speeches, shared widely on social media, articulate frustrations over poverty and inequality in resource-rich nations, lending a voice to millions who feel sidelined by global systems. Beverly Ochieng from Control Risks noted that Traoré is particularly skilled at capturing the energy of a generational shift across the continent. Economically, Burkina Faso has found surprising resilience under Traoré's government, with growth in agriculture and services driving improvements. social spending has increased, and more domestic revenue is being tracked and utilized. While critics focus on potential risks, these gains bolster Traore's image as someone delivering tangible results despite the odds. The stark contrast between Traore's bold leadership and Barron Trump's apparent struggles highlights two vastly different ways to respond to pressure. While one moves decisively in defense of a nation's future, the other faces the personal weight of maintaining a controversial legacy. Yet their stories intersect in the shared challenge of navigating intense expectations on public stages. As Traore continues his campaign for sovereignty, his actions raise broader questions about what leadership means in a world that places relentless pressures on those in power. At first glance, Barron Trump and Ibrahim Traoré seem to exist in completely separate worlds. One grew up in the shadow of immense privilege, while the other rose to prominence by assuming responsibility for a nation's survival. Yet the connection lies in the pressures placed on both as young men in the spotlight, grappling with expectations that go beyond their years. These pressures play out in ways that are as revealing as they are starkly different, raising questions about how privilege and responsibility mold individuals when watched so closely by the public eye. The most striking contrast is their starting points. Barron Trump was born into a world of wealth and insulation. Shielded from many of the struggles that define ordinary life, his path, until recently, seemed predictable. A private education, an elevated lifestyle, and carefully controlled appearances. Yet privilege does not erase pressure. In his case, the weight comes from being the son of one of the world's most controversial leaders. His every action, or lack thereof, is interpreted against the backdrop of his father's legacy. For Traoré, the opposite is true. He did not enter the public eye through inheritance, but through action. Rising to power during a military coup, he made the deliberate choice to take on what many would avoid, a leadership role in one of Africa's most unstable regions. While one is shaped by a legacy he never asked for, the other aims to create a legacy under conditions of immense strain. Media coverage plays a pivotal role in how the world views both figures, often exaggerating their accomplishments or amplifying their struggles. In Barron's case, the media focus has been unrelenting. Stories of his alleged loss of control dominate headlines, often with little evidence to substantiate claims. Speculative narratives swirl around his personal life, making him a lightning rod for both sympathy and criticism. This relentless gaze ties directly to the shadow of his father. Public interest in Barron is less about who he is and more about what he represents, Trump's youngest child, caught in the aftermath of one of the most polarizing presidencies in modern U.S. history. For Traoré, the media lens focuses on his actions as a leader. Whether his anti-imperial stance or his controversial alliances, the framing of his story is international in scope. He is depicted as a symbol of defiance by those who support him and a potential threat by those skeptical of his intentions. Media narratives in both cases do more than reflect reality. They actively shape perceptions. These two figures embody broader societal expectations and reveal how they operate differently based on context. Barron represents the challenges of being a young individual tied to a controversial legacy. His every action is scrutinized, not because of its intrinsic importance, but because of what it signifies for the Trump family as a whole. This reflects a broader societal tendency to place crushing expectations on heirs to prominent families, a need to see either redemption or downfall in their actions. Contrastingly, Traoré's role as a young leader highlights the expectation of decisive action under pressure. His age becomes part of his story, not in the form of fragility, but as a testament to his ability to rise against immense odds. For him, the world doesn't wait for development. Swift results are demanded, and patience is minimal. These divergent narratives of youth under pressure and youth in action outline the complexity of public expectation. The way media and cultural norms frame leadership and legacy is critical. For Barron, his legacy is inherited, shaped by forces outside his control. Public perception views him as a mirror of his father's influence, often trapping him in an identity shaped by association rather than personal choice. For Traoré, legacy is something he crafts on his terms. His persona in the public eye is not defined by family or circumstance, but by decisions and rhetoric. such as his bold rejection of imperialist influence. As he famously stated, "We African heads of state have to stop behaving like puppets who dance every time the imperialists pull the strings." These contrasting stories expose just how much public opinion is built not only on actions, but on their framing by media, shaped to fit broader narratives about responsibility, privilege, and individual power. What ties these vastly different figures together is the burden of expectations, but their responses couldn't be more different. Barron finds himself retreating under the intensity of inherited scrutiny, while Traore charges forward, defining himself completely in contradiction to external forces. Both stories raise questions about how much agency anyone truly has when their life unfolds under the global spotlight. If anything, their stories challenge us to rethink how we judge public figures and how different circumstances can shape paths in dramatically opposing ways. The stories of Barron Trump and Ibrahim Traoré reveal how circumstances shape individuals in profound ways. Barron, raised in privilege, faces public scrutiny tied to his father's polarizing legacy, while Traoré, thrust into leadership, navigates the pressures of defending a nation's sovereignty during political upheaval. These contrasts highlight how reactions to privilege or adversity define public perception. Reflect critically on how media narratives shape these stories, often influencing how we judge character and competence. Understanding these dynamics encourages a broader perspective on leadership and legacy. Resilience, responsibility, and circumstance continue to play crucial roles in shaping those who live in the public eye,